How's that?
Beautiful.
I've learned a bit about Steve's life from his brother Nev and his family and a few of his closest friends. Let me tell you what I've learned before we hear from some of those who knew and loved him. Stephen David Morgan was born on the 20th of January 1958. Pig was not his given name. That came later. He was the first of Val and Alan's 3 children. And sadly his parents are unable to be here today. They're getting on and not that well. Pig grew up in Box Hill with his brother Nev, who came along in 1959, 18 months later, and his sister Karen, who was born in 64. He went to Box Hill Primary and then to Koonung High. School wasn't his thing. It wasn't that he was a terrible child or particularly naughty, he just wasn't that interested. Movies and music were always his things. Pig self-educated all his life. His knowledge of film and music was encyclopedic. He met Norm and Alex at high school. They'd regularly wag art and go around to the Morgan house in Poplar Street, Box Hill, and play pool and listen to records. Pig was still at school when he and Nev, with a lot of help from their dad, turned their garage into a cinema. Velvet curtains and the lot. Pig would go out and hire 16mm movies from someplace in South Melbourne, and he charged friends and local kids to come to the pictures. They almost broke even sometimes. Pig wasn't business-minded, but he loved sharing his passions and he loved bringing people together. He wasn't really into sport at school, but he did have a thing for basketball. He played a bit after he left school and he was a tragic Detroit Pistons fan. Left school at the end of year 10 and got a job as a projectionist at the Star Cinema in Elizabeth Street. It was an adult cinema. Pig was never going to work a conventional job. Moved out of home when he was 18, moved into a flat in North Fitzroy with Gino, who was another projectionist, also showed adult films. And he moved around a lot as a young adult. Flats in Fitzroy, Elstonwick, a house in Cheltenham called The Boot. Pig, Pop, Cav, Jack, Gino, Hoffy and Juice all lived there, and they held the weekend-long boot fest in that house in about 79. From 82 to 90, he lived in a share house in East Malvern with Ray and Merrin and others, and all the places that he lived in were all covered in movie and music posters. He bought a flat in Sunshine 17 years ago and happily lived alone there. He travelled when he was young. Pig and Nev went to America when they were 18 and 16 respectively. Pig came back looking like a cowboy. His mates started calling him Tex, but that never really stuck. It was Cav who gave him the name Pig, after Warren Pig Morgan, Thorpe's Aztecs keyboard player who went on to play with JPY, still does. Back to Steve. In 81, 82, Pig went to live in London. He shared a house with Norm, Jack, Cav over there, and he met Pauline, a significant girlfriend. Apparently the time over there didn't end that well. In the late 90s, there was another very significant girlfriend, Val. She was Canadian, and visa issues got in the way of that one. Back to Melbourne. Pig came back home from London, hepped up on punk. Like a few of you did. Got hepped up on punk. A lot of you still are. He started hanging around Missing Link in the city, the hippest record store in town at the time, and he spent so much time there that they offered him a job. Couldn't believe his luck, sometimes he slept there. He loved to impart his knowledge, and he had a natural bent for what would be called customer service, a term Steve would have hated. But he welcomed people in a way only he could. He didn't judge. In a world where music snobbery was rife, he wasn't a musical snob. He was an enthusiast, and when someone would come into one of the shops and ask him for a certain record, he'd always say, "Great record." He taught Warwick everything he knows. He worked with Warwick at Missing Link, and then he got a job at All Go-Go with Bruce Milne after he left Missing Link. And after he left All Go-Go, Warwick poached him and brought him to Greville, where he stayed for 25 years, which is a long time to work in any job. It's a very long time to work in a record shop. And Steve would get shitty sometimes at work, Warwick tells me. And so would Warwick, that's what you do at work. But he never raised his voice. Customers loved him. He'd make mixtapes for them sometimes, and then he burnt CD compilations. And he treated all his customers the same. He'd talk to the Vietnamese girls. His mum owned the false nail place down the road the same way he talked to Nick Cave. And the kids in the neighbourhood called him Mr. Pig. And he loved kids. His friends' kids loved him. His nieces and nephews loved him. Nev and Sue's kids, Carl, Nina and Solly, and Karen and Ray's kids, Tara and Samuel, loved their Uncle Pig. He had time for kids, he had time for everyone, and he could find the passion in people no matter their age. Steve was very good at his job. He was never taught how to be good at his job. It was just the way he was. When Bruce started working at Greville, he suggested to Warwick and Pig that they should maybe have a business meeting. Pig told him, "Don't try any of that professional shit on me." And they've never had a business meeting. He never had a car or a driver's licence, timely, or a mobile phone. He finally had to get an email address begrudgingly, never went anywhere near social media. Pig was hugely popular without ever trying to be. He held on to friends and he was great company. He loved a one-liner and was prone to repeat his favourites. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. I resemble that comment. The pleasure was all yours. His death was a huge shock. He was fit. He rode his bike everywhere. He walked. He had to, he couldn't drive. He was only 61 years old, just too young. But he lived a life wholeheartedly worthy of celebrating this afternoon. An artistic life, lived the way that he wanted to live it. Now it's time to hear from some others who knew and loved him. And first up is old high school buddy Norm.